My name is Caleb Ross, and I'm 23 years old. On October 18th, 2025, I died during the No Kings protest in Washington, D.C. They said cardiac arrest, maybe pepper spray complications, but I know the truth. I didn't just die in the street. I stood before the king I'd been rebelling against without even realizing it. That morning, the city was already vibrating with anger. Helicopters thumped overhead, chants echoed between marble buildings. I held a cardboard sign that said, "Power belongs to the people." We believed it every syllable. I'd spent months online helping organize marches, convinced we were part of something pure, something righteous. We weren't violent. We were awake. Or at least that's what I told myself. Every step toward the Capitol felt electric. Crowds chanted, cameras streamed, slogans flared across LED screens. We shouted for freedom, yet each shout carried a hidden fury I couldn't explain. The air itself felt charged, almost alive, as if the rage of millions was breathing through us. When the police lines formed, the crowd surged. Someone threw a bottle, another shouted, "Hold the line!" And suddenly, what had felt like unity turned into noise, a wall of sound thick enough to swallow thought. The tear gas hit first acrid, white, burning. Then came the stampede. I remember stumbling, coughing, feeling my chest tighten like a vice. The sign slipped from my hand. My vision tunneled. Voices blurred. The last thing I heard was the chant twisting into something unrecognizable, not protest, not prayer, just pure chaos. And then silence. Not peace, not rest, just a silence so absolute it felt like time itself had stopped to listen. That was the moment I realized the spirit I'd been fighting wasn't oppression, it was authority, and the one I was rebelling against was the only one still reigning. The gas cloud rolled over me like smoke from a burning altar. Every breath seared, every heartbeat pounded against my ribs, until it simply stopped. I dropped to my knees, palms on the cold pavement. Boots thundered past, banners trampled, glass breaking somewhere in the haze. Sirens wailed, and red-blue lights bled together through the white fog. The world blurred sound, sight, smell collapsing into a single pulse of pain that suddenly went silent. I fell sideways, my cheek pressing against the asphalt. The taste of metal filled my mouth. Someone shouted for a medic, but their voice stretched and warped as if underwater. The noise around me slowed until it became one long hum, then nothing at all. No darkness, no tunnel, just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels alive. I tried to open my eyes and found myself standing. Only, I wasn't standing in the street anymore, I was above it, watching the scene unfold like a paused video. Bodies moved in slow motion. My own lay, motionless, beneath a banner smeared with soot that read, "Freedom for All." Paramedics pushed through the crowd. A stranger knelt beside me, lips moving in prayer. The air trembled, filled with invisible static, and I could see the anger of the crowd as light red, sharp, violent, swirling through the smoke like a living thing. It wasn't just people shouting, it was something using them. Every scream fed it, every curse strengthened it. The spirit of rebellion wasn't metaphor anymore, it was real. A force as tangible as gravity, and I had marched right under its banner. Then, through the haze, a new light appeared. Soft, golden, steady. It didn't fight the chaos. It simply existed, unafraid of it. It pulsed once, and all the sound vanished. A voice, quiet, unmistakable, whispered, "Caleb, the kingdom you resisted is the only one that can set you free." The words wrapped around me like air returning to empty lungs, and the golden light drew me forward. The street below looked unreal, like a photograph caught mid-explosion. Every fragment of glass hung suspended in the air, reflecting the city lights like frozen sparks. Tear gas clouds curled but never rose. Even the flags stopped waving, captured between gusts. Time itself had surrendered. I hovered a few feet above the ground, weightless, detached, yet more alive than I had ever felt. I could see everything in impossible detail, the cracked asphalt beneath my body, the trembling hands of the medic checking for a pulse, The way my friend's tear rolled down and hung in midair before it could fall. There was no sound, only vibration, like the faint hum of electricity through eternity. Then came awareness, a clarity sharper than vision. Every heart in that crowd pulsed in colors. Some glowed pale blue fear, others burned crimson rage. A few flickered gold compassion, trying to survive inside the noise. And threading through them all, like smoke through a keyhole, was a darker current. It twisted through chants and hashtags, whispering, "You're right, they're wrong. Rise higher, burn brighter." It fed both sides equally. It didn't care who won, only that the fire kept spreading. The realization hit like a tide. Rebellion wasn't new. It was ancient, older than politics or protest. The same voice that once said, "I will ascend," was still recruiting volunteers one shout at a time. The golden light ahead pulsed again, and the darkness recoiled from it like mist meeting dawn. Its warmth felt familiar, though I'd never known it before, a memory written into the soul itself. It carried no argument, no slogan, only rest. When it touched me, the city vanished, the gas, the banners, even my body. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but that light breathing in rhythm with mine, and I understood I hadn't escaped death. I'd been invited to see what life was supposed to look like before pride taught us how to protest heaven. The light gathered itself into shape. At first, it was only radiance, then a figure emerged inside it, solid yet transparent, every movement woven from peace. I didn't need an introduction. Every cell of me already knew it was Jesus. His presence carried the weight of authority I'd spent years fighting without realizing who I was fighting. It wasn't the authority of power, it was the authority of truth. He didn't speak at first. He simply looked at me, and the look itself was a question: what were you trying to fix by breaking everything else? I tried to speak, to explain the cause, the injustice, the anger that had driven me into the streets. But the words collapsed before reaching him, because in his eyes, I saw both the pain of the oppressed and the arrogance of those who claimed to speak for them. He loved everyone I had labeled enemy. Then his voice came gentle, resonant, like wind moving through eternity. "Caleb, you fought for justice without mercy. You shouted for freedom, but never listened for truth. Every cause that forgets compassion becomes corruption in disguise." Each word pierced but healed at the same time. He stretched out his hand, and images unfolded around us. Protests turning violent, leaders twisting truth, families divided by conviction instead of love. Through it all, I saw an invisible hand guiding the chaos, not God's, but the same ancient rebellion that had once tried to dethrone him. The spirit of rebellion, he said, never demands justice to heal, only to rule. It promises liberation but breeds new chains. You cannot destroy tyranny with rage. You conquer it with humility. The light around him brightened until the weight of my pride fell away like dust. For the first time, I knelt not to surrender to a movement, but to majesty. Tears came, not of shame, but of recognition. He reached down, lifted my chin, and whispered, "Now you will see what rebellion really serves, and what surrender truly saves." The light rippled outward, and scenes from my life unfolded around us like windows suspended in air. They weren't in order, they flowed by truth, not time. I saw myself as a kid standing in church beside my parents, mouthing hymns I didn't understand. Even then, I had hated rules. I thought obedience was weakness. Every no felt like a chain. Another moment appeared me in high school, arguing with a teacher, convinced I was the only one brave enough to speak the truth. I watched my own eyes harden with every victory. The applause of my classmates had felt like purpose. I mistook pride for conviction. Then came college rallies, interviews, live streams. I was the face of a movement. Every like and share was oxygen. But as the memories played, I could see what I hadn't seen then: shadows behind the cheers. Some faces glowed with hope, but others darkened with hatred. The same slogans that once sounded noble now rang hollow. Poisoned by ego, Jesus stood beside me, silent but present. Each image stripped away another excuse. When I tried to defend myself, we were fighting for change. The vision changed again. I saw the people I'd yelled at online. Their faces showed confusion, hurt, fear. My words, once clever, sharp, hit them like stones. Every argument I'd won left another heart more closed than before. And then I saw my mother, praying alone in her kitchen, whispering my name through tears. The light around her burned brighter than every protest combined. Jesus finally spoke. You mistook passion for purpose, Caleb. Passion burns loud and fast. Purpose burns steady and clean. True justice begins in the heart before it marches in the street. I dropped to my knees, ashamed and yet strangely free. He reached toward me again, and when his light touched my chest, I felt the anger dissolve, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The light around us shivered, then thinned, until the world below reappeared, but not the world I'd known. Washington stretched beneath us, the monuments glowing white, the streets still littered with protest signs. But this time I could see the unseen. Hovering above every crowd was something alive, shapes made of shadow and flame, twisting like smoke given thought. They weren't human, but they wore our emotions like armor. They moved through chants and microphones, feeding on outrage, passing it from one person to the next like a contagion. Every time someone shouted in hate, the creatures brightened, flaring red. Every time someone forgave or prayed, they recoiled, their color fading. Jesus stood beside me, his expression sorrowful. This is what they call activism, when love is absent. The same rebellion that began before the world now wears new slogans. The vision widened. Cities across America flickered into view. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, everywhere, the same dance. Anger disguised as purpose, bitterness marketed as courage. Social media feeds pulsed like veins of lightning, carrying offense faster than truth could travel. What I'd once called awareness was actually infection. Then he showed me something deeper. In every heart burned a small spark, meant for worship. When it didn't rise toward heaven, it bent inward, fueling self-importance. That was rebellion's true power, convincing people that defiance was destiny. I whispered, "So rebellion never ends, it just changes costumes." He nodded. Pride is the oldest flag still flying, Caleb. It waves wherever humility falls. The vision trembled. The dark forms shrieked and scattered as a single shaft of light pierced the sky, landing on a small group kneeling together in prayer amid the chaos. Their quiet wasn't weakness, it was warfare. The darkness couldn't imitate it. Remember this, Jesus said as the city faded. Evil doesn't fear protest, it fears repentance. One humbled heart can silence 1,000 angry ones. The light swelled again, washing the last of the smoke away, and I felt his peace settle over me like dawn after a sleepless night. The light around us curved outward until I was no longer above one city but the whole earth. Night covered half the planet, yet it flickered with restless light screens, protests, wars of opinion glowing in every language. It looked alive, pulsing like a giant heartbeat made of unrest. From the Middle East to Europe, from college campuses to corporate boardrooms, I saw the same pattern, repeating people demanding freedom while chaining themselves to fury. Each nation spoke its own slogans, but the rhythm was identical. Listen to me, bow to me, agree with me. And beneath those words moved the same dark pulse I'd seen before, the spirit that whispers, "You deserve to reign." Jesus' gaze swept across the world, steady and mournful. They think rebellion is progress, he said. But rebellion without repentance becomes revolution without restoration. Every kingdom built on outrage will devour its own builders. The vision zoomed closer. I saw leaders shouting into microphones, movements rising and collapsing overnight, children learning to distrust everything sacred. Even churches were splitting people, choosing sides instead of shepherds. Truth was no longer pursued. It was voted on. I wanted to look away, but he lifted my chin. The world calls this awakening, he said, but it is only noise dressed as wisdom. The true awakening begins when they fall silent long enough to hear me again. Then the earth itself shimmered as if struck by wind. From the chaos, I saw small lights appearing, families praying around tables, strangers forgiving each other, young people singing instead of shouting. Each act of humility pushed back miles of darkness. The planet, once flickering red with anger, began to glow faintly gold. "Write what you see, Caleb," Jesus said. "The spirit of rebellion can shake nations, but the spirit of surrender will heal them. Tell them America's revival won't start in crowds, it will start in quiet hearts." The lights faded, but hope remained like embers refusing to die. On the left, the cities burned with brilliance movements, campaigns, revolutions. People shouted the same word in every tongue: freedom. But the more they demanded it, the less they recognized it. Governments toppled, faith fractured, even families became battlefields, every opinion became a flag. And from the ashes of all that pride rose a new kind of tyranny, one that smiled, one that promised equality while devouring identity. I saw America divided into tribes of ideology instead of communities of grace. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Compassion became suspicion. The language of love disappeared, replaced by slogans that sounded righteous but reeked of revenge. Churches tried to speak truth, but their voices were drowned by applause for anger. Jesus' voice broke the silence. When unity becomes impossible, rebellion becomes inevitable. And rebellion, when matured, always crucifies the innocent again. The light dimmed, and I saw crosses thousands stretching across the landscape, each one bearing the weight of silenced truth. On the right, the noise stopped. Small circles of people knelt in prayer, black, white, rich, poor, their hands clasped instead of raised in protest. No banners, no cameras, just repentance. Their humility spread faster than hatred ever had. From these circles, light rippled outward, weaving across the nation like veins carrying mercy. I saw leaders confessing pride publicly, movements dissolving into ministries. The same streets once filled with shouting, now filled with song. And through it all, one phrase echoed across the land: no kings but one. Jesus turned to me, eyes ablaze with both warning and hope. Both futures are still breathing, Caleb. Which one lives will depend on who your generation chooses to kneel before. The two worlds merged and vanished into silence, leaving me trembling before the king I had once rejected. The two futures faded into stillness, and the light around us steadied like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. I stood before him, trembling, emptied of every slogan, every certainty. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to fight, I wanted to listen. Jesus stepped closer. The brilliance around him softened until his eyes were the brightest thing left. When he spoke, his voice carried both command and comfort. Caleb, you marched to wake a nation, but you were asleep yourself. Now I send you back, not as a protester, but as a peacemaker. The words sank deep, echoing like waves inside me. I nodded, though I didn't feel worthy. Lord, they won't listen. He smiled, not mocking, but knowing. They called me weak, too. But the meek will inherit what the angry will destroy. Speak truth gently, and it will travel farther than a shout. He reached out, touching his hand to my chest. Light poured through me, not burning, but engraving. Every heartbeat carried a new rhythm, humility before heroism, mercy before might. Tell them rebellion isn't courage when it forgets compassion, he said. Tell them freedom isn't found in defiance, but in forgiveness. America will awaken, but only when my people remember who the true king is. Images flashed through my mind. Me speaking to students on campuses, kneeling with officers, praying with former protesters, writing instead of raging. The scenes felt ordinary, yet heaven celebrated each one like victory. Lord, I whispered, how will I know what to say? His answer was simple. Listen before you speak. Love before you lead. And when the world tells you to rise up, kneel. The light began to pull away, folding back toward eternity. His final words followed like the echo of thunder made of grace. Go, Caleb. Stir the sleeping, not to rebellion, but to reverence. Then the brilliance vanished, replaced by the weight of a human body and the sting of returning breath. The light folded in on itself until it became a single point, pulsing once before everything went black. Then impact. I fell through silence into sound, through peace into pain. Air crashed into my lungs like a wave against concrete. My chest heaved. My ribs screamed. Sirens howled above me. Someone was shouting, "We've got him back. We've got him back." Cold pavement pressed against my skin. Hands gripped my shoulders, rolling me onto a stretcher. The smell of smoke and sweat filled the air. Flashing lights painted everything red and blue again, the same colors I'd died under. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. My voice came out as a rasp. I saw him. The medic glanced down, thinking I was delirious, and said, "Easy, kid, don't talk." But I wasn't talking to him. I was talking to the one whose voice still echoed in my heart like thunder wrapped in calm. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The siren wailed as we sped through the streets. Each bump felt like the collision of two worlds, the kingdom I'd just left, and the chaos I was re-entering. But the fear was gone. Even in pain, I could feel the same peace from that golden light. whispering, "You're not going back alone." At the hospital, they said my heart had stopped for nearly 7 minutes. No brain damage, no paralysis, just exhaustion and chemical exposure. One doctor called it luck, another called it a miracle. But I knew what it really was: mercy. Days later, when I saw footage of the protest replaying on the news, I barely recognized myself, the face twisted in anger, the voice shouting over others. I stared at the screen and whispered, "That's not who I am anymore." Because once you've stood before the real king, every other crown looks counterfeit. At night, in that hospital room, I would lie awake listening to the monitor's rhythm and realize it was more than a heartbeat. It was a reminder: rebellion lost, reverence reborn. It's been 5 days since that morning in D.C. The bruises are fading, but the memory never will. Every time I hear a crowd chant, I feel two worlds tugging at me, one shouting for justice, the other whispering for grace. Now I know which voice wins when the shouting stops. People still call me an activist. Maybe I am, but not the kind I used to be. I don't march to make noise anymore. I walk to make peace. I've learned that change doesn't start in the streets, it starts in hearts willing to kneel before truth. Because rebellion can topple kings, but only reverence can transform them. When I speak now, I tell people I'm not against passion. I'm against pride dressed as purpose. If your cause costs you compassion, it isn't holy, it's hungry. And hungry movements always end up devouring the very freedom they fight for. America doesn't need another revolution, it needs a revelation. One that begins in silence, where anger runs out of breath and love starts to speak. The same Jesus I met in that light is still speaking, still inviting, still patient with our chaos. He doesn't demand surrender because he's a tyrant. He asks for it because he's the only one who can be trusted with power. If you've been shouting so loud you can't hear him anymore, try this. Stop. Turn off the feed. Lower the flag. Unclench your fists. Ask, Lord, is this rebellion or righteousness? He'll answer, but only in the quiet. My name is Caleb Ross. I died on a street built for protest and woke up in a kingdom built for peace. And if there's one thing I learned from the king himself, it's this: the loudest movement on earth is heaven whispering, "Be still and know that I am God."